It was cut with a saw, a circular saw, that was around 37 feet in diameter. And the geometry of it, the striations or the tool marks indicate that it was a very advanced method of cutting. There's something that is very fundamental about all of this work, and that is that the culture that created these artifacts had arrived in their thinking to require extreme precision in the artifacts that they were creating. Precision that we didn't really find necessary until the Industrial Revolution. You know, just the concept of having a civilization on the planet that was that advanced would surely interest the Chinese and motivate them to start looking again at their own artifacts from ancient periods, ancient times.
大家好，我是塔哥。今天我们要访谈远古外星人系列节目的重要嘉宾，证明远古石料文物是先进科技产物，来自美国的机加工领域专家克里斯托弗·邓恩。克里斯托弗·邓恩先生现在生活在美国，是一位具备深厚机械加工功底的工程师。他的整个职业生涯都围绕着机械加工，包括航空航天领域零件的加工制造。他对先进的数控机床、激光切割设备都非常熟悉。他早年接触了考古学家皮特里爵士的书籍，了解到古埃及有很多不同寻常的石制品文物，用手工工具无法制作它们。在邓恩后续前往埃及的旅行途中，他也的确发现了埃及大量遗迹中存在不同寻常的石制品。通过认真分析这些石制品，邓恩确认了他们都经过先进的机械设备加工而成，远非传统埃及考古学派声称的手工工具所制作而成。这激发出了他之后一直持续至今的研究热情。邓恩先生工作之余，无数次前往埃及、秘鲁等历史遗迹，探寻有着先进机械加工痕迹的石制品。他的研究吸引了很多媒体的注意，他多次登上过 Discovery 发现频道、历史频道等节目，包括中国观众所熟悉的远古外星人系列节目中，有很多佐证均引用了他的研究。邓恩先生的研究被众多史前文明研究者所推崇，他所发现的证据进一步证明了在我们所了解的人类文明之前，可能存在着更高等级的先进文明。这一期节目要感谢我的朋友 James 邀请并且一起采访了邓恩先生，也感谢我的同声翻译小罗。那么下面就请看我们的采访正片。
Can you give the audience some convincing examples with advanced machining mark?
Yes. The one would be the Petrie core number 7. It's in the Petrie Museum. The second, I think the most impressive piece, is a granite slab that is at the pyramid at Abu Ruwash, which is about 5 miles away from the Giza pyramid, the Great Pyramid. This piece shows that it was cut with a saw, a circular saw, that was around 37 feet in diameter. And the geometry of it, the striations or the tool marks indicate that it was a very advanced method of cutting. There are artifacts on the Giza Plateau itself that show that they have machine marks, and they can be analyzed, and you can actually look at the geometry of them and the shape of them. And they are what I consider to be done with they had to have been done with some kind of machine tool, but not a lathe, because they have compound radii. So you have one radii that comes into another radii that actually forms a shape, and and then there are tool marks in the corner of these things. So these are granite objects on the Giza Plateau near the pyramids, and there are several artifacts that are near the Sphinx, particularly to the south of the Valley Temple near the Sphinx, that show these advanced machining marks and geometries. But if I could say the one important aspect in determining whether a piece is machined or not, it has to be measured. And if if it is precise and geometrically consistent, in other words, if it's supposed to be round, it's perfectly round. It's not something that you can look at and say, "Oh, that's a round part." That standard is not enough. Is not enough. You have to be able to demonstrate that it is a round part by measuring it. So all of these that I have inspected, I've inspected with the most precise methods that are available to me at that time. And it was over a number of years, because going to Egypt as a tourist and making observations is one thing. Doing a complete study is another. And I have never professed that my studies have been exhaustive and complete. And what I have done is pointed out features that might attract other professional engineers, hopefully in Egypt, who would look at those artifacts for themselves. Fortunately, that is now happening, and Egyptian engineers are now supporting lost technologies of ancient Egypt. And they see that their history needs to be changed. Of course, there is resistance to that. The officials in Egypt resist that idea because it challenges their whole political structure or their whole history, and also weakens their power. So that's what we're faced with right now. There are many others, and they are in my book. The examples of perfection can be seen at the Dendera Temple, where the alignment of the columns is quite incredible. When you get to measure into deep crevices to look for the marks of machine tools, I used a forming wax, and the forming wax that's pressed into the corner of a statue in the Luxor Museum has consistency and characteristics that show that the tool that they were using went too far into the material. And so that would, what we would call it, would be a machining mistake. And for primitive people to be able to cut into very, very hard rock and leave grooves in the hard rock with extremely small radii, a radius of 30 thousandths of an inch, or 1 millimeter, it will be, with the methods proposed that they had, it will be impossible to achieve that and unnecessary. Does that answer your question? Is that complete enough? Or?
Far more than enough. The drilled core number 7 Petrie discovered is really a good example. I visit Petrie Museum in UCL years ago. The core number 7 was there. There's some other stone artifacts next to the core 7. They are also very interesting. Some looks just like a tiny vase, which is perfectly crafted. It's almost impossible to believe they were not processed by a machine. We can also find a lot of artifacts like that in the British Museum and other museums.
There are fine examples in the British Museum, for sure. I think the most impressive to me were the Ramses statues.
Yeah.
And there is one in the British Museum that was taken from the Ramesseum near Luxor. That is an incredible artifact. And it shows the slip of a tool also in the corner of the mouth. So it is an impressive artifact. I have, I think, a couple of chapters in my book on the Ramses statues.
Yes.
Perfectly symmetrical, with recognized geometries, consistent from one side of the face to the other. And then you showed a photograph there of Pumapunku.
Yes. The cuboid you measured there.
Yes, that particular artifact is the artifact of Pumapunku. It's like a rectangular column with a groove running close to the edge. And I had a measuring instrument with me that measured the flatness of a piece. If you have a flat surface, it was an indicator or a gauge that if you swept it around, it would show you how flat the surface was. And it was within half a thousandths of an inch of being perfectly flat. Yeah. So that is quite an achievement. And it's not what, I mean, if I could make one point, there's something that is very fundamental about all of this work. And that is that the culture that created these artifacts had arrived in their thinking to require extreme precision in the artifacts that they were creating. Precision that we didn't really find necessary until the Industrial Revolution. And so, I mean, even if we go back 100 years into our history, and certainly the Chinese culture goes back even further, and you start to examine the artifacts that were created 100 years ago, if you go back 200 years ago, you don't find anything quite like the precision and complexity of artifacts that you find in Egypt and Pumapunku.
Thank you. Those objects found with the advanced machining mark were far more than 1 or 2 pieces, and they are located in many historical sites, right? Kind of everywhere. It shows that the precision is not coincidence. It proves that they can be replicated at that time.
Yes, and it is replicated over and over again. And it's not just in Egypt, it's in South America, it's in India, and they have remarkable temples. And the Barabar caves are incredible. I don't know if you've heard of those, but I have not examined anything in China yet, so I can't speak to that. But I'm sure that just the concept of having a civilization on the planet that advanced would surely interest the Chinese and motivate them to start looking again at their own artifacts from ancient periods, ancient times.
About what time or by what chance you found there's advanced machining mark in the ancient Egypt stone statue and other stone artifacts?
I think we'll have to go back to 1977 when I first started to study the Great Pyramid. It was through a book called Secrets of the Great Pyramid by Peter Tompkins. And it was published in 1971 and became very popular. And with respect to the machining aspects of it, my background has been in manufacturing. And so I'm very familiar with machining. And actually, my skills as a machinist is what brought me to America, because my original training was through an apprenticeship in Manchester, England. So it was natural for me to connect with the work of William Flinders Petrie, who wrote a book called Pyramids and Temples of Giza. And in that book, there was a chapter on the mechanical methods of the ancient Egyptians and some of the artifacts that he was studying. And so he had concluded that the ancient Egyptians were familiar with lathes. They were familiar with saws, circular saws, and also straight saws. And they were familiar with fairly efficient drilling methods. And one of the artifacts that he displayed in his book and described was what they call a granite core, where a hole is drilled with a tube, and then the central core is removed, leaving the hole. And it showed a feed rate of the drill of just over 1/8 of an inch. It was about 1/8 of an inch in distance, and it was not a horizontal groove, in that when the groove started, it ended up at the same place. It was a spiral groove. So it indicated what the advancement of the tool was into the material, which was extraordinary. And he couldn't find an answer for it. But I tried to explain that there were maybe methods that could achieve that. And I wrote an article that was published in a magazine called Analog Science Fiction, Science Fact, and described a process called ultrasonic machining. Well, that got some very positive reviews, and it also got some very negative reviews, because I was challenging the established viewpoint on this ancient culture with respect to their level of technological advancement in that period. But the facts are the facts. And so if you have an artifact, even a simple one, and you can't find an explanation or the methods that you are selecting to explain the methods does not reproduce that artifact, then you haven't selected the right method to do it. And that has been my approach the entire time, has been to examine the artifacts in tremendous detail, and then select what I consider to be, in my professional opinion, what the most difficult aspects of the work would be, and then propose that those who wish to explain how ancient Egyptians created these artifacts, that they approach it from the aspect of replicating the most difficult part of the artifact, not the easiest part. And so that challenge has not been taken up or performed to date. There have been challenges against my ideas, as you could imagine, and so they have tried to explain how ancient cultures saw by using a piece of copper with sand, and then rubbing it against granite and rubbing it back and forth. You can actually remove a few centimeters, and then voila, that's how they did it. And the most profound and amazing thing to me is that a lot of these experiments take place in front of incredible artifacts that just scream at these ridiculous tests and say, no, you haven't explained how I was created yet. And so, as far as the academic point of view, obviously I take exception to it, and they take exception to me. But at the same time, the people who would be involved in doing that kind of work today would not come out of universities, Egyptology or history departments. They would come out of engineering departments and manufacturing companies, quarries and things like that. So anyway, that is how I started to examine the machining, and that eventually resulted in this book. I don't know if you're aware of this book in
impressive.
China. You do, you're right, good. And that is my second book. But in my first book, I was even more controversial, and that was describing the Great Pyramid as a power plant. So I started off with the Giza power plant, explaining all the details and features of the Great Pyramid and how they functioned as a machine for creating energy. And then that didn't get very far with Egyptologists. So I wrote this one, which is basically a challenge. And they have both been ignored for maybe 25 years, I would say, by Egyptologists. There have been some effort to dispel my point of view, and some of them very recently. It seems that there has been a tremendous rise in interest in lost technologies in Egypt. And so with this added attention to this kind of thinking, then there have been, the opposition have come out with their surrogates to challenge it. But again, they are amateurs when it comes to going on a building site and analyzing how things were done. They're enthusiastic amateurs, but amateurs nevertheless. And so that is going to be addressed in my third book, which I'm currently writing. And I should have it finished up by the end of this month, but it won't be published until 2023.
因为下面的问题是关于塞拉比恩的，先由我给观众插播一个简单的介绍，以便更好地理解访谈中所提及的内容。塞拉比恩位于埃及首都开罗以南约30公里的塞加拉地区，在阶梯金字塔的西北部。它是由法国考古学家奥古斯特·马里埃特于1850年发现的。塞拉比恩已发现的区域主要由地下的主通道以及在主通道两侧众多的穴室组成，整体呈现 L 型。在穴室内放置着由巨型岩石加工而成的石盒，这些石盒由合体和顶盖组成，合体和顶盖由同一块岩石切割加工而成，顶盖预估重量接近30吨，合体预估重量约60多吨。已发现的石盒有20多个。传统考古学家对这些石盒的解释是，它们是被用来埋葬神牛的尸体，但事实上，在塞拉比恩内没有发现过任何动物或者人类的遗骸。更让人费解的是，那些已经完工的石盒内部有着现代顶尖数控加工设备才能达到的超高精度，而传统古埃及学者对塞拉比恩往往持着忽略不视的态度，不愿去面对那些石盒的工艺问题，只是一味地强调石盒是用来存放神牛的遗骸。除了石盒的加工精度，另一让人匪夷所思的问题是，在塞拉比恩狭窄的通道内，怎么展开成百上千的人力来搬运近100吨的石盒，特别是将石盒从主通道搬到两侧穴室的这一过程是怎么实现的呢？即使我们认可足够多的人力在露天场景能够搬运巨石这一从未被彻底验证的假说，那也无法解释这么多巨型石盒在塞拉比恩狭小的空间内到底是怎么完成的搬运。
Okay, let's turn to the stone box in Serapeum. The lid of the stone box is about 30 tons.
That one?
Each box. Yeah. We saw the picture. Thank you.
It gets around.
The lid of the stone box is about 30 tons. Each box and its lid came from the same piece of stone. What's your impression when you first saw those stone boxes? Do you think the hand tool Egyptologist introduced to us can cut the lid off from the raw stone with the same precision?
No. No, I do not. I first entered the Serapeum, the tunnels at the Serapeum, in 1995, and I was absolutely shocked by what I found. But I didn't have the measuring instruments I needed to determine what I was looking at. All I could do is through just rubbing my hand across it and not feeling any mistakes or no waviness, and it just felt like an extremely flat surface. But the question in my mind, of course, was, well, how flat? And it was, since then, it was 6 years before I was able to get back into Serapeum. That it was 1995, my first visit. 2001, I gained permission from Zahi Hawass to go in, and I took some measurements at that time, and that's where those photographs came from that visit. It was a very brief visit. I wasn't in there very long, but the square that you see is calibrated to less than 1/10,000th of an inch, and I had a straight edge that was accurate to within 1/20th the thickness of a human hair. So that is one aspect of it that is very significant. One of the other aspects to those boxes that is extremely significant is the corners. The corners are very, very sharp in terms of when you look at how difficult it is to manufacture a product. These boxes are like 13 feet long, 7.5 feet wide, and about 8-9 feet high. Probably on the inside, just over 6 feet when you're standing inside the box. But the corners are very, very telling, because that's where the creators of these boxes went to an extraordinary amount of effort to create very, very sharp interior corners. They measure less than, or just over 1/4 of an inch radius, which is very significant when you consider that the proposed methods for creating these boxes by Egyptologists is that they either tubular drill them or they bashed the material out with dolerite pounders. Both methods, there's nothing that supports either one of those methods. But so when I wrote Lost Technologies, I dedicated it to the Egyptians and their glorious heritage. But at the same time, I put out a call for Egyptian engineers to do further studies of them. And just in the last few years, an Egyptian engineer by the name of Ahmed Adli took up the challenge and went into the Serapeum recently and did his own measurements. He used different instruments than I did. He used a Bosch laser distance measurer and also a digital protractor for measuring the corners. And he came out of the tunnel saying, well, it looks like Chris Dunn was right, because what he found was the same level of perfection. But the parallelism between the sides is what is extraordinary. So, but even so, we have even more sophisticated tools to apply to get a greater understanding of the nature of these boxes. The other thing, which is interesting, is that it appears that the site was still in progress. In other words, it had not been completed. You have incomplete boxes and lids on the inside, and you have some boxes that are installed in the crypts, but they do not have lids on. And there are some variations in the interior of the boxes with respect to the level of precision that they hold. That is normal in manufacturing when you consider that an engineer submits a blueprint for manufacture. The manufacturer takes the blueprint, determines what kind of material that they need, and in the industry that I've worked in aerospace, they may order a forging. The forging will be delivered with enough stock to remove to make the final piece. But then the forging is machined in stages, it goes to a semi finish and also then a final finish. And that's what I think we find in the tunnels in the Serapeum, is that you have different stages of finish on the boxes. But the finished interiors, and the ones that I checked, and the one that Ahmed Adli inspected, they indicate that they had a much higher level of precision. Even if you would argue that they were not working to the level of precision that we do today, the level of precision that they have demonstrated far exceeds what they have been given credit for in terms of their level of sophistication in applying technology.
Nowadays, what kind of tool we need to achieve that kind of flatness? You inquired some professional stone processing companies whether they can achieve the same result. What's their reply?
I approached 4 companies who made precision granite artifacts, precision granite surface plates, angle plates, what we call V blocks. These are all laboratory grade, inspection grade, tool room grade, precision gauges or surface plates. And I sent them a drawing of the Serapeum box and asked for a quote for them to make one just like it. I only got a reply from one, and it was True Stone in Minnesota. And True Stone, their guy wrote back to me and said that they didn't have the equipment to be able to do that. What they would suggest would be to make it out of five pieces and deliver it to the site and bolt it together. Well, the key there is that people have assumed that because that was the response from one of our top precision granite manufacturers or surface plate creators, that it will be actually impossible to make one today, and that's not the case. If we had to make one today and it had to be put out of solid granite, then it could be done. It would be enormously expensive, of course. I mean, just the raw material would be expensive. And in 1995, Eric Lether, True Stone, said that the material, just the material itself in granite would be around $175,000, and then the transportation costs would be extraordinarily expensive. The Department of Transportation charges would be high, and the equipment to haul it would be quite, for heavy objects. But the idea that we couldn't actually do it today, I think, is wrong. If enough money was put behind it, if you could devise a machine tool that would we create one of those boxes. What we have in the Serapeum is an unfinished box. So if we, it's just roughed out on the inside. Now, even if you look at the inside of that unfinished box, you will see that it still has sharp corners, even though it's rough. So it would have been delivered to the Serapeum with an envelope of material from the finished dimensions, where you'd only have to remove a minimum amount of material to achieve the final dimensions. The methods that they would have used to hollow out the box and bring it to that shape would be fairly sophisticated and significant. And but once you receive the rough piece and you move to finish it, then there are two points to make there. The evidence seems to indicate that they brought the boxes underground before they finished them off. Now, why is that? Why is that important? It also indicates that the final finishing of the boxes occurred after they were installed in the crypts, because you have boxes without lids, and they're not the most precise of the boxes that you see there. So what you have is the different stages of manufacturing. And but what would a machine look like to finish the inside of one of those boxes? What would the process look like? And that's what I'm actually going to discuss in my book. My next book is going to be, there's going to be a chapter on the Serapeum, and the title of the chapter is "Where Are the Machines?" So, you know, when you imagine what a machine tool looks like, today, machines are familiar to us. I mean, all you have to do is do a Google search on the internet, and you could have all kinds of examples of machines. But as far as those boxes, I'm proposing that the box actually became a part of the machine that was used to finish the inside. Radical idea, yeah? So what they would have done is finished the top surface to the level of precision that's required, and then they would use that top surface to navigate along with an attachment that went on top that had a vertical axis that moved down the box on the inside, and it had a grinding wheel, or a cup wheel, what we call a cup wheel, that would shave off the inside surfaces. And that would be manipulated either automatically or manually up a precision. It's a precision mechanism, very precise mechanism. But the top of the boxes would serve as part of the machine. Normally, when we think of machining, we think we take the material to a very, very large machine. It sits inside the machine. The components of the machine include a base or platen on which the material sits and is attached to, and then all these axes come in from different angles to perform their work. But there's another another method that is used also, and that is such as if you are in a steel rolling mill or a paper rolling mill, and you need to change out some bearings, or you need to rebore a hole. They will bring an attachment that they will actually attach to the machine itself to machine those holes and repair the machine. So it's not a new idea, but I think it's one that would work in the Serapeum, and that may have been the method. But certainly not pounding balls and certainly not tubular drills. There's absolutely no evidence to support that.
Thank you. Next is a Giza pyramid. In your opinion, there was an explosion happened in the King's Chamber. There's evidence in the King's Chamber and the Grand Gallery indicates the explosion did happen. Can you introduce the evidence to us? What could cause the explosion?
Yes, well, the Giza power plant proposes that the Great Pyramid was generating energy. It was taking the energy from the Earth that passed through the Great Pyramid. In my first book, I described it as the seismic energy or vibrations of the Earth. The Great Pyramid, by size and dimension, the placement on the planet was a actual integer to the planet, and responded harmonically to the seismic forces in the planet. But these vibrations were triggered by equipment in the subterranean chamber. The Grand Gallery, I proposed, they had resonators installed that converted vibration passing through the Great Pyramid into airborne sound. That airborne sound then was directed into the King's Chamber, and it caused vibration of the granite. The evidence to support that is found in the geometries and the dimensions of various features in the Great Pyramid, particularly the King's Chamber, as it served as a Helmholtz resonator that collected that sound, and the shafts are very specific to the theory too, in that the northern shaft coming into the chamber served as a waveguide. The evidence to support that there was hydrogen involved in the process can be found in the Queen's Chamber, what they call the Queen's Chamber. And the Queen's Chamber had shafts leading to it, but not connected to it. They had no outlet either, but they served to deliver two chemicals into the chamber, which mixed and boiled off hydrogen. And that hydrogen then filled the interior of the Great Pyramid. As far as the explosion, the hypothesis, it was noted by Sir William Flinders Petrie that the chamber had suffered enormous damage. The walls had been pushed out, and the beams, the granite beams at the top that created a flat ceiling, were cracked. And so I proposed that there was an event in prehistory, and it's now becoming apparent and clearer that there was a cataclysmic event that affected the entire planet, probably an extinction event, or certainly one that reduced a thriving civilization to rubble to the point where there was no hope for recovery. That event came from outside the planet. I comet strikes. I mean, you're talking about the Younger Dryas and the the comet strikes that caused a huge cataclysm, and it could be that one or even one earlier. The point is that civilization that built the Great Pyramids and all the other amazing artifacts that you find around the world was wiped out, and the event affected the Great Pyramid because the fundamental physics behind how the pyramid operated was one of resonance and harmonics, and that resonance harmonics came from the Earth. And the Earth is, we think, a closed loop system, until it gets visited by something from the outside. And an influx of energy, mechanical energy, an influx of a huge amount of mechanical energy in the form of comet, would cause the pyramids to start shaking apart, which they did. As it was functioning, the Great Pyramid, when this event happened, had a lot of the material on the outside removed, maybe some protective features that kept oxygen from entering into the pyramid, and and then when that happened, with oxygen mixing with hydrogen in the King's chamber and with an ignition source, we don't know which, but and then it just exploded. The evidence is in the King's chamber itself, but also in the Grand Gallery, where you see the scorch marks on the ceiling of the Grand Gallery, the damage there, right? And I think there is a photograph of mine that has been circulating around the internet on that one too. So, you know, the evidence to support the theory is there. They would just need to try and understand it, you know.
In 2018, a scientist team discovered a huge void inside the pyramid by scanning the mu particle. Does it help to support your Giza power plant theory?
Yes.
Okay. Fair enough.
You wanted a short answer. Yes.
I mean, a little bit complex.
A little bit of context.
Yeah, a little bit.
It's a part of the machine, and it was not a part that I had actually identified as the machine. It was given to me by an aerospace engineer, my good friend Eric Wilson, and he called me one day and said, "You heard about the big void?" And I said, "Yes, of course." And he says, "Well, I know what that's for." And I said, "Well, really?" Because I'm still puzzling over it. And he said, "It's right where it needs to be, and it's a preamp for the microwave signal that is necessary in the King's chamber." And I said, "That makes sense." So that's what I'm going with in my next book. I'm going to describe it as the preamp, of course, with the proviso that there's still a lot we don't know about it. I mean, basically, what we have is a point cloud with very imprecise resolution. So, you know, as far as its exact shape and its dimensions, nobody knows. what's inside that space. Nobody knows that either. And and so until we can get more information on it, it's just a speculation. But I think it's an interesting. They don't even know if it's on the same angle as the Grand Gallery or if it's horizontal. So there are still a lot of questions about it. But now there's a new scanning project that's coming in where they're with a new team where they promise to produce 100 times greater resolution than the previous one. And actually create a tomographic view of the interior of the Great Pyramid, similar to what you would get with a CAT scan, at the hospital. So they think that is going to take 2 years. So we'll see. But I mean, it's promising. It's exciting. It certainly fits in within the Giza power plant theory. I don't know any other theory that it does fit within. So, and that again, that's another thing that will be addressed in my forthcoming book.
There are many ancient walls in South America. Each block's shape is irregular. Each block's edge is perfectly matched with the blocks next to it. All the blocks just like a perfectly made jigsaw puzzle. In Egypt, there's the same style wall. What's the technology behind these walls?
Now the first wall in Peru, you're talking about the Sacsayhuaman?
Yeah, I will mention Sacsayhuaman later, but in some other areas, there's small blocks, not so big as Sacsayhuaman. There's small blocks, irregular shape. I mean, each block match the block next to it perfectly. I mean,
yeah.
And then we also find this kind of wall in Egypt.
Yes, the Caracancha in Cusco that has smaller blocks but irregular shaped, and then in Egypt, I think it's the third pyramid, Menkaura's pyramid has the irregular shaped blocks too. And one of the proposals is that they are irregular shaped to be more resistant to earth tremors and earthquakes. And I think that is probably the most reasonable and sensible point of view, particularly when you look at Sacsayhuaman in Peru and their massive interlocking stones. That if you just kind of look at them and you see that the way they fit together, and you can imagine in your mind, I said, well, if the ground moves in this direction, then this is going to prevent the separation of the joints. If it moves in horizontally, this feature is going to prevent separation of the joints, and you can find that all over that wall. I mean, that is like I don't know. Sacsayhuaman is an amazing place. But the difference there is that the blocks of Sacsayhuaman, and the precision of the joints, it does not go through the full width of the block. So it only goes back maybe a half or 1 inch where they're actually butted together, and then there's a draft angle where that's filled with rubble or soil or something like that. So they are incredible structures wherever they're found. But I think longevity, being able to withstand earth movements and keep everything together, I think that was the objective. That's my personal opinion.
I noticed there's some kind of knot in the wall, in some blocks. Is it possible that the knot, just like the edge gate in the plastic injection object, they first heat the stone, makes the stone liquefied, then reshape the stone? That may also explain how each block can get perfectly shaped.
I have done some studies on the idea that ancient stone objects were poured rather than quarried and cut conventionally. I've talked to geologists who have heard the same theories, and I haven't found a geologist yet who actually agrees with it after they look at the rock. They find that it's natural rock. And there have been studies made to actually verify whether some of the claims about poured rock are correct, and those studies have revealed that, particularly with the pyramids, that it's natural limestone. It's not. It hasn't been poured. The knobs that appear on these rocks, you find them. You find them in Egypt. You also find them in Peru too. So, and they, they may have served a function of some kind in lifting and transporting, and some of them still exist in the Serapeum on some of the lids. So they definitely, I think, they were intentional, but I don't agree that they were the result of a mold, But it's not that asking those questions is wrong. I think all questions are good, and that's the only way we can progress is by asking questions and coming up with different ideas. So, but I think it's still a mystery. There are people who have said, well, they may have something to do with energy or energy transfer or something like that. You have some really puzzling features when you go to Ollantaytambo in Peru, where these protrusions appear out of the cliffs. These are more regular than the knobs that you see on the pyramids, the third pyramid at Giza. But there are these like round protrusions, but they seem to have an angle on them. But then when you look at the Machu Picchu and some of the structures, you'll find inside the structures stones inserted in a similar manner. And some people have proposed that they're just a utility for maybe hanging a coat or a picture or something like that. But I don't have the answer. I have the same questions.
Right. Do you think the anti-gravity technology were used when they built the walls in Sexy Woman? And do you think the anti-gravity technology has anything to do with the acoustic technology?
I think that anti-gravity or a different technique for lifting very heavy objects where gravity is dispelled or it is actually used to in reverse, where you can lift something where it's lighter than air. That has been demonstrated, I think, and I believe, by Edward Lee Skalman in Florida, who claimed that he knew how the pyramids were built, and he proceeded to build his coral castle out of multi-ton objects of coral weighing up to 30 tons. And he was a very small man, about 110 pounds at his best, I think. And he was working alone, and he wouldn't let anybody watch him. And he took the secret to his grave. So, yeah, I know. He came from Latvia, and he was he's very suspicious of governments. And being an escapee from the Soviet bloc, I imagine that suspicion is well placed. But coming to America, he didn't want evidently he would share with anybody, not even government representatives that went down to visit his place one time. But I think that he had the secret. I strongly believe that it can be recovered and used again. And I think it was applied all over the world. If anything, the ancients were masters at moving extremely heavy objects into some really awkward places. And it's not just in Egypt, it's in South America, it's in Lebanon, it's in Jordan. I mean, all these places, they have demonstrated an uncanny ability to move massive multi-ton, 1,000, 1,200 ton blocks, and build structures out of them, where we're throwing up steel and putting a thin cladding on the outside, and we think we're building. Go to Egypt and look at the way they built, right?
Nowadays, there's some stupid theory in the internet saying that many historical remains, including the Great Pyramid, are made in modern times. They were built in order to cheat people, making people believe that there's splendid civilization in the past. Do you agree with this theory?
I don't even look at them. I haven't heard that one. I wouldn't spend any time thinking about it.
下面的时间交给塔哥吧。
Okay,
So the next questions will be raised by Mr. Chalu.
thank you. 然后，邓恩先生，您在世界各地呢，也都发现了这些先进科技加工的石块。本来我想，问您的是，您是否有来过中国探索这些不寻常的一些古代遗迹？那么您刚才似乎提到，就是您并没有去探索过，但是我想请您谈一谈，您是否对中国这一块是否有自己的一些了解，就是这些不寻常的古代的遗迹。
I have not studied Chinese artifacts. My focus has been mainly on Egypt. I mean, even my studies in Peru have been brief and cursory. So I mean that is a place that is it has a wealth of information to be gathered. But the best evidence, in my opinion, that I've found and know about is in Egypt. And there's so much of that that it's almost like it's exhausted to actually cover it all. So even though I know these places exist and I respect the cultures that create these amazing artifacts, I've limited my time necessarily to just Egypt in terms of what I consider to be getting as much information out as possible about that particular culture. Maybe in my next life, I will study China. Or maybe one of you will get there before me and have the job done. Is there somebody in China who is studying Chinese ancient artifacts and presenting a different point of view?
在中国的话，也有一些考古学家，他们正在探索一些不寻常的遗迹。比如说像这个中国四川的三星堆，非常的有名啊。然后呢，也有很多人认为这个三星堆是外星文明留下的遗迹。然后包括在西安的这个秦陵啊，它那里分布着大量的金字塔群，包括在中国西藏那边。像冈仁波齐峰也好，像许多的山峰也好，那里似乎也有考古学家在那里发现有很多的金字塔痕迹在那边，包括在西藏的一些山川有着非自然形成的金字塔结构比例的一些这个山峰。那么这些都是有国内外的，包括中国的也好，国际上的也好，有很多考古学家正在这方面进行一些探索。那么也不知邓恩先生是否对这方面有过打听过，或者说听说过中国的这些不寻常的遗迹想请他谈谈他的看法。
Yes, I mean I've heard about the pyramids being in China, and I have heard that there's been a recent interest as far as trying to learn more about them. But I haven't read any materials in terms of official archaeology reports or anything like that. But I know that there's many pyramids in China.
Yeah.
I'd love to go see them.
下一个问题，邓恩先生，您呢也是经常作为《远古外星人》这个电视节目的嘉宾出镜。那么您对这个古代石块加工痕迹的验证，似乎为他们的远古外星人理论提供了强有力的证据。那么您个人是如何看待这个理论的呢？那么这些石块呢，如果说并不是主流考古学家他们所声称的这个是手工加工而成，那么到底是谁建造了它们？您是否认为可能真的是古人是受到过来自更高文明的这个外星文明的一些帮助呢？请谈谈您的看法。
Those are two words that Egyptians don't like to hear. They're both A words. One's aliens and the other one's Atlanteans. And I think they see it as another way of removing credit or artifacts from Egypt. So they have created a story surrounding their monuments, and they have a belief that it was ancient Egyptians that created everything. So they're offended if you say, "Oh no, Atlanteans did it or aliens did it," because that's another way of saying, "Well, you know, you're too dumb to do it. You couldn't have done this." My personal opinion is that they were done by indigenous people living there at the time. the fact that there are no machines left, there's, you know, that the culture, basically what we have to study and look at, the remnants of a civilization. It's like we're just looking at the skeleton. So where is the flesh? Where's the bones? What does that consist of? You know, all we have is the skeleton. And the other aspect to that is that, and this is a little more broad and global in a way, and that is technology transfer is quite common. And if you go back to, you know, the ancient Romans, and the development of their civilization, they were masters at laying tile and construction. They had some fantastic engineers. And there was basically a mindset in those times of proprietary protection of methods. Not necessarily, I mean, this was before the patenting system came into being, was where a lot of the skills and information was held within closed groups in guilds. They call them guilds, right? But the sharing of information and technology transfer has been happening for over 100 years. The foundation and the father of American manufacturing is a man named Samuel Slater, and he worked for a spinning mill in England. He learned how the machines functioned. In America, they couldn't get their machines to function. He emigrated to America, taking what he had learned. He didn't take any blueprints or anything like that. He emigrated with the information in his head, and so he started the Industrial Revolution in America, and so that was a technology transfer. And what you have is you know, this kind of diffusion of ideas and technologies that are happening, and they're happening more rapidly now than they ever have in the past. So if you take that point of view and you go back into ancient times, and if you consider what kind of skills and help were necessary to build the pyramids, obviously you had the inventor, the designer, the physicist, the acoustic engineers, those who are expert in building, quarrying, all the different ancillary skills that are necessary to build the pyramids would have had to be in place. I mean, first of all, you know, it starts in mind when something is dreamed up. But if you consider what the pyramids were for and how they function, that mind can dream anything, but without other minds getting involved and supporting the idea and doing the research and development, so on and so on. So it's a long progression. And you know, just to say, well, aliens came down and went boom, 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 and there's your pyramid, and then they left with the machine tools that they were using. It's a very simple answer to a very complicated question, and in some ways, it's a lazy answer because they stop questioning after that, right? Until the aliens come back. And so, you know, now we have to wait until the aliens come back before we can figure it out. No, I think we continue asking questions and trying to figure it out as human beings collectively on the planet. You know, use our collective brain instead of our individual brain to come to the right conclusion and answers.
It seems more and more evidence are emerging that our civilization history and origin is not like what history book tells us. There are too many mysteries. Do you have some new subjects to research in your plan? I want to hear about.
Right now, I'm focused on finishing my book. And there are some things in life that you have no control over. And one of them is actually writing a book. I found that instead of me shaping a book, the book shapes me. And so, you know, it's kind of like when I started down this path with the third book, I'd taken so many diversions and tribulates and, you know, off ramps into the wilderness, started whacking among the weeds that, you know, I had to consult with wise friends in order to drive me back on a good path. But in the end, it's been very rewarding. Now, as far as further research, a lot of the times, particularly when doing research in Egypt, new information about the pyramids is very slow to come out. Of late, there's been a significant amount, a remarkable amount, and very valuable information. And so, you know, what will the future hold, and how will it dovetail in, or, you know, fit in with my theory? As far as how I see my future, is to continue to cooperate with Egyptian engineers and scientists, and encourage them and consult with them, and to continue their studies and research and help them in any way I can there. I'm not sure I have another book in me to write. Somebody wanted me to write a book about Pumapunku, and I entertained the idea for a while, but my publisher is very demanding. It's not like publishing, you know, on the internet where you're the editor as well as the writer. My editors at the Barron Company are very strict, and so they have high standards. Also, they have very strict standards as far as using content that originates with other people, like photographs or text and things like that. So they won't publish a photograph if I don't have permission to have it published. It has to go through their legal department, and before it goes in the book. And that's a good thing for me. I think that is a great thing. The internet is an entirely different thing, and it's kind of wide open. There's not much restraint anywhere. And at first I thought that was a bad thing, but now I think it's a good thing, and it makes me pause to think why in the past people have been so secretive and so possessive of their ideas or their work, and not willing to share it. Because I think by sharing work freely, it raises the consciousness of the planet, and the internet is perfect for doing that. sometimes it will it will expose a lack of consciousness if you get involved in some message board discussions, which I have in the past, and I've learned a lot, but at the same time, I've been abused a lot too, as you could imagine. Long-winded answer for a very short question. I am sorry.
Have you considered to publish your book in Chinese?
I think my publisher has an agent in China, but I'm not sure that. I don't think I've seen any translation rights being.
No.
No. It would be crazy of me to not say I would love to have my book in Chinese, and I want you guys to make it happen. So I guess the short answer is yes, please. Get me a Chinese publisher.
Okay, well, we will try. So thank you very much, Mr. Dunn.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I mean,
thank you very much, gentlemen.
We really appreciate for your time.
Of course. I will send you a link to Ahmed Adli's. He's the Egyptian engineer I was telling you about, and he has created some remarkable content and is receiving a lot of attention in Egypt. And one of his comments to me was, "Keep going, sir. You have inspired a generation of Egyptians." Yes,
I was inspired by you. I mean, I brought you a video.
Yeah. So, I mean, and definitely, I want my books to be all over the world. Even if I don't get a penny out of it, I would like them to be read by everybody, or at least have them aware of it. You know, I mean, it's published in Russia, Czechoslovakia, different countries, Spain, others, Greece, you know, but not enough countries.
If it is possible, just visit China, okay? We would like to invite you to visit China.
Well, I would like to also, and I think, you know, maybe brighter days are ahead for all of us in terms of the pandemic, and things will get more peaceful.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Thanks, guys.
Take care.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.